The package was neatly wrapped in brown paper, no return address, and sat quietly on the porch like any other delivery. When Daniel opened it, the smell hit first, coppery, sour, and unmistakably wrong. Inside was a red-stained box lined with silk, and in it lay something no one should ever have to see, a human heart, still warm. Underneath, a single note: "Now you know how she loved you." Lily's disappearance didn't begin with screams or blood. It started with silence, the kind that creeps in unnoticed, wrapping itself around a person's life until it feels normal. She had always been independent, often vanishing for a few hours with her camera, chasing golden light or early morning mist. Daniel admired that about her, her quiet passion. He never questioned the long drives or the unplanned stops. She'd come back smelling like pine or rain, cheeks flushed from the cold, memory cards full of ghostly trees, empty roads, and forgotten places. But in the weeks before she vanished, things began to shift. She became distant, not cold, just distracted. She'd stare off at nothing, sometimes stopping mid-sentence to jot something in a notebook. Her hands trembled more than usual when she held the camera. She started sleeping with the bedroom window open, even when the wind howled through the trees. Daniel thought it was stress. She said she was chasing something real. Emotion in desolation, she called it. The first real clue came when Daniel started organizing her things for the missing persons report. Her journals were untouched, but her camera gear sat haphazardly in a corner, unusual for Lily, who treated her lenses like glass bones. He powered on the backup DSLR and noticed something odd. In the last batch of photos she took, there was a figure. Not someone posed or acknowledged, but always there in the corner of the frame. A blurred silhouette behind a tree. A pale hand gripping a rusted gate in the background. A reflection in a puddle. It could have been coincidence, Daniel told himself. A jogger. A hiker. But Lily hated photographing people. She said they ruined the purity of a frame. She wanted landscapes, lonely architecture, open skies. Not strangers. He brought the photos to the police. They examined metadata, studied the timestamps. Every photo had been taken in the same area. Red Hollow Trail, an abandoned hiking path 30 miles outside the city. It had been closed off after a landslide a few years ago, yet Lily had gone back repeatedly. The officers searched the site and found Lily's car parked behind a cluster of thorn bushes near the trailhead. The keys were still in the ignition. Her favorite wool sweater was folded neatly on the passenger seat, but there was no sign of her camera or her phone. Nothing screamed foul play. There were no drag marks, no blood. Just an eerie absence, as if she had stepped into the woods and disappeared between frames. In the glove box, they found a memory card in a small plastic case marked only with the word, "For you." It was addressed to Daniel. The footage was raw and jittery, mostly handheld video snippets instead of photos. Lily's voice occasionally broke through the wind, murmuring things like, "He watches from the birch trees," or "He doesn't blink." The final clip was only 10 seconds long. It showed Lily standing in a clearing, the early dawn casting pale blue light around her. Her hair whipped in the wind, her eyes wide. She was holding a piece of cardboard, hastily torn from a box, and on it were scrawled the words, "He said he'll make me eternal." Then the camera fell to the ground. The last frame lingered on a set of muddy boots approaching from the treeline. Daniel watched that clip 100 times. He memorized the pattern on the boots, the sway of the trees, the wind's sound as it rustled the leaves. The police combed the area, bringing in cadaver dogs and thermal drones, but the forest gave them nothing. It was as if Lily had been swallowed whole. Detectives believed she had been abducted, possibly by someone she'd met through her photo expeditions or her therapy volunteer group. Daniel remembered a man Lily had mentioned once, a former inmate who'd spoken in poetic riddles and drawn unsettling pictures of hollow-eyed women. She said he creeped her out, but she kept working with him out of pity. Daniel couldn't shake the idea that someone had been stalking her for longer than anyone realized. That the figure in her photos wasn't a coincidence but a warning. One she tried to deliver in her own quiet, artistic way. After a week with no leads, media attention began to wane. Flyers faded on lampposts and people started to assume the worst. But Daniel held on to hope, obsessing over the footage, retracing her steps, even spending nights alone on the trail hoping for a sign. All he found were shadows. Then one morning, 11 days after her disappearance, the mail came. Wrapped in brown paper and tied with twine, the box was small, oddly heavy. It had no return address. Daniel tore it open, thinking maybe someone had found Lily's camera. But the moment he lifted the lid, a metallic stench punched him in the face. Nestled inside red velvet was a human heart. Still red. Still moist. Beneath it, a note scrawled in neat, childlike handwriting read, "Now you know how she loved you." And just like that, the silence shattered. The moment Daniel handed the heart over to the authorities, the case shifted from a missing person to a homicide. The media caught wind of the grotesque delivery, splashing headlines with phrases like "heart in a box" and "gruesome love letter." But Daniel couldn't bring himself to watch or read any of it. His focus tunneled in on something deeper, those cryptic signs Lily had left behind. The memory card, the cardboard sign, the haunting line. "He said he'll make me eternal." She had been trying to warn him, not just about a disappearance but about someone. The police reopened old leads, this time with urgency. They questioned Lily's friends, colleagues, and patients from the therapy group she volunteered with. One name kept resurfacing: Marcus Eldon. A soft-spoken man in his early 40s, Marcus had a history of mental illness and had served time for stalking and attempted assault a decade prior. He had been part of a prison arts rehabilitation program and later joined a community therapy initiative run by Lily's clinic. When Daniel brought up the name to Detective Reeves, the man's face tightened. "We've been watching him," he said, but nothing stuck. Marcus had been released early for good behavior. A model inmate by all accounts, but there was something off about him, too well-behaved, too quiet. His criminal file noted an obsession with art, specifically, emotional preservation. That term echoed in Daniel's head. "He said he'll make me eternal." Digging into Marcus's past, Daniel uncovered an unsettling detail. While incarcerated, Marcus had submitted several artworks to prison galleries. The themes were always the same: hearts, hollow bodies, faceless women, and captions that read like poems from the edge of a nervous breakdown. One painting in particular stood out: Red Devotion. It showed a woman without a face, cradling a human heart in her hands, a blood-stained trail behind her leading to a shadow in the trees. Daniel printed out every painting he could find. He laid them across the dining table, arranging them by date. Slowly a pattern emerged. The faces began to resemble Lily, first vaguely, then unmistakably. Her hair, her clothing style, even her posture. Marcus hadn't just been painting fantasies. He had been watching. When detectives searched Marcus's last known address, they discovered something far worse than anyone had expected. Hidden behind a sliding panel in the basement wall was a studio, if it could be called that. The smell hit first: metallic, moldy, wrong. Inside were canvases smeared with blood-red hues, crude sculptures of women with stitched mouths, and jars filled with what appeared to be animal parts. But one object stopped the search cold. In the center of the room stood a mannequin, painted to resemble human skin, hair carefully attached to its scalp with surgical staples. It wore Lily's favorite scarf. Across its chest, in black paint, was a message: "She lives now through my love." On the nearby work table was a worn leather notebook filled with drawings, obsessive notes, and entries written in looping, elegant script. One page read, "She saw me in the trees. She didn't run. That means she understood. I gave her eternity." Marcus was nowhere to be found. It took 6 days to track him. A convenience store camera caught him near the state border, alone, looking thinner, hollow-eyed. Police finally apprehended him in an abandoned farmhouse 30 miles from Lily's last known location. He surrendered without resistance, smiling faintly. During interrogation, Marcus didn't deny anything. He spoke calmly, even lovingly, about Lily. He described her as the last pure light in a dying world. He claimed she welcomed what he offered. When pressed about the heart, he said, she wanted Daniel to have it, to know the depth of what she carried for him. He gave no details about where the rest of Lily's remains were. He said she had become part of his art. "She's everywhere now," he murmured, "in color, in shape, in memory." When Daniel faced Marcus in court, their eyes met only once. Marcus smiled. Not cruelly, not mockingly, just softly, like someone looking at a shared secret. But Daniel didn't feel rage. He felt a cold, sinking understanding. Lily had known. Maybe not at first, but eventually. She had seen Marcus. She had feared him. And in her own quiet way, she had left breadcrumbs, hoping someone, Daniel, would follow them in time. The courtroom couldn't contain the horror of the case. Psychologists debated Marcus's sanity, artists dissected his work, and true crime media descended like vultures. But nothing answered the most agonizing question: why? Why her? Marcus's answer, delivered in front of the judge, echoed like a requiem. Because she was real. She didn't flinch. She saw the dark in me, and blinked. He was sentenced to life without parole. No plea for insanity. No remorse. And yet for Daniel the story wasn't over. Because even with Marcus locked away, the final piece was still missing. Lily. Her body. Her soul. Closure. But the worst part wasn't that he hadn't found her. It was that a part of him feared Marcus was right. That maybe in her final moments Lily had looked into the dark and blinked. Daniel didn't cry when they confirmed the heart belonged to Lily. He didn't scream or collapse or do anything the movies taught people to expect. He just sat there, silent, as the lab technician gently closed the envelope containing the DNA results. There it was, in blood, in tissue, in absolute certainty. The heart sent to him by mail had once beaten inside his wife's chest. He had held it in his hands. The moment the news went public, reporters staked out his front lawn, hungry for statements, reactions, anything. Daniel ignored them. He unplugged the phone, turned off the television, and spent days alone in the house that still smelled like her shampoo and fresh linen. It should have felt like the end, but for him, it was just a black void opening wider. Despite the arrest of Marcus Eldon and the mountain of evidence against him, Daniel couldn't breathe easy. There were too many pieces missing. The body was still gone. The motive, if you could even call it that, was carved out of madness and delusion. And there were details that Marcus refused to speak of, no matter how often investigators tried. He claimed Lily had accepted her fate. He said she had smiled. Daniel knew better. Lily wasn't the kind to smile in the face of terror. But the final video on the memory card said otherwise. That look in her eyes, the way she held that sign, "He said he'll make me eternal," still haunted him. Not just because of what it implied, but because of what it didn't say. He'd watched the clip over and over, wondering what happened in the seconds after the boots entered the frame. The court case dragged for months, but Marcus never wavered. His public defender urged him to plead insanity, but Marcus refused. He wanted the world to know what he did, and he wanted them to understand why. In statements he spoke of soul transfers, of turning flesh into art, of eternal preservation. And the heart, sent by mail, was his centerpiece. His gift. Daniel sat through every day of the trial, face blank, fists clenched, watching as Marcus spoke like a priest at a sermon. He told the jury that the heart was Lily's final offering, her act of devotion. He said he didn't murder her, he immortalized her. None of it made sense, but that didn't stop the whispers. After the trial ended and Marcus was sentenced to life without parole, Daniel thought the nightmare might start to fade. But instead it evolved. It began subtly. A photograph pinned to his front door, black and white, slightly overexposed. It showed a forest path with something blurry in the center. When Daniel squinted, he could make out a woman-shaped figure standing still. At the bottom, someone had written, "She walks now." He called the police, but there were no fingerprints, no leads. They chalked it up to a sick prank. Then came the red flower in his mailbox, a blood lily, fresh, its petals sticky with some reddish-brown fluid. Again no note, no witness. Just silence. He started hearing creaks in the house at night, finding the doors unlocked in the morning when he swore he'd locked them. One time he walked into the kitchen and found a photo album open on the table. Lily's album, the one she kept hidden in her closet. Every photo had been altered. Her face scratched out. Daniel began to wonder if Marcus had an accomplice. A follower. A disciple even. Someone who had seen the trial, read about the art, and felt inspired. The thought was nauseating, but it made a sick kind of sense. Marcus hadn't just committed a murder, he'd curated an experience. And in the age of morbid fascination and viral horror, that could be enough to spark imitation. He installed security cameras. He moved to a new apartment. Still, the feeling didn't leave. The sensation that he was being watched clung to him like a shadow. One night, he found a note on his car windshield, "You never really saw her." He began having dreams, Lily standing at the edge of the woods, eyes blank, lips parted as if about to speak. But she never did. Sometimes she held her camera. Sometimes her chest was missing, blood blooming through her shirt. Daniel always woke up before she reached him. Eventually he returned to Red Hollow Trail. Against the advice of police, friends, and his therapist, he stood at the same spot from the last video clip, staring into the trees. For hours he didn't move. He waited. He didn't know what he expected. A ghost? A killer? A memory? But as the wind whispered through the branches and the sky began to darken, Daniel realized something chilling. He didn't come for closure. He came for her. For a part of him, a broken, desperate part, believed she might still be out there. That maybe Marcus hadn't lied completely. That maybe, in some horrible way, she had become something else. Something trapped between frames, walking the border of memory and madness. And as the sun set and the shadows deepened, Daniel didn't leave. He stood there alone listening, waiting for her to blink.